In this module, we'll be covering the web filtering feature. These are some of the topics that will be covered by this module. We'll be looking at describing and configuring web filtering. This includes knowing and understanding the options for filtering. We'll also learn about some of the different methods and advanced features provided by the filtering options. Finally, we will take a look at the web filter profiles and how to apply them. We're now going to look at the web filtering feature. This includes content inspection, URL filter lists, and FortiGuard filtering. What is web filtering? Simply put, it is the act of controlling the websites that a user has access to. This can be done for many reasons, such as to block inappropriate content, reduce network congestion, preserve employee productivity, and the list goes on. Web filtering can be used as a way of preserving employee productivity, preventing bandwidth misuse, and reducing exposure to threats. The list of potential benefits, if used correctly, is quite large. There are three different options that can be used with web filtering. There is flow-based, proxy-based, and DNS-based web filtering. We'll first talk about the proxy-based solution. As the name implies, proxy-based filtering makes use of a transparent proxy in order to intercept communications between the client and server. It is capable of inspecting the full URL of the website in order to determine if access is allowed or not. It is also the only method of web filtering that allows for customizable block pages to be displayed in the user's browsers. While this provides extra security, it obviously also comes at a cost. This is the most CPU and memory intensive option out of the three. This is because the FortiGate unit needs to intercept and proxy the transmissions. It is also the slowest when you compare it to the other two options. Proxy-based is the default setting in a web profile. While this method is the most resource intensive, it is also the most accurate. You can see the advanced section. There are a lot of options available on how to inspect and look at the websites that users visit. Another option for web filtering is to use flow-based mode. This is a non-proxy solution that uses the intrusion protection engine to examine the data as a stream. The advantage here is that data is not cached, and there are not the same delays a proxy imposes. The IPS engine is designed to handle a great deal of traffic, so your maximum data throughput is much higher. Like proxy-based, it also inspects the full URL in order to determine access. While there are some great advantages, there are also some limitations to this. First off, web filter overrides are not possible. Even if an active override is in place, it will have no effect. You are limited to using URL filtering, FortiGuard filtering, and rating overrides in the advanced options of the web filter profile. The advanced options section is much smaller. You can't do things like restrict cookies, Java applets, or ActiveX. It is simple enough to switch the method of operation. There is the option to select the mode of operation in the top section of the web filter profile. You can also see the advanced options section doesn't have nearly as many options for filtering and inspection. This is the major limitation of flow-based inspection. Since it's not a proxy, it doesn't understand the traffic with the same level of details. Lastly, we have another option for web filtering called DNS-based filtering. As the name implies, the DNS query is used to determine where the user is going. The query gets redirected to the FortiGuard SDNS servers in order to determine a category. Since it is working on the DNS level and not proxying or parsing HTML traffic, it is very lightweight on both memory and CPU resources. When accessing a website by IP address, the FortiGuard service resolves the address. Therefore, a website that is normally blocked by URL is also blocked by the IP address. Finally, you don't need any type of SSL inspection turned on. HTTP and HTTPS protocols both begin exactly the same way, that is, with a DNS lookup. Since neither protocol is actually being inspected in any way, you do not need to concern yourself with SSL communications of any kind. SSL is a topic covered in the 301 course. Now for some of the disadvantages. Since it operates on the DNS lookup, the URLs are not contained, only the host name. So your filtering is not as granular as the other two methods. Because of this, none of the advanced options in the profile can apply since they all operate on the URL or information on the website. You can only make use of a web URL filter list and FortiGuard category filtering, and only on the host name. Also, you cannot get individualized block pages. You can either have the DNS response give a domain not found in the browser, or supply a portal and build a generic block page that these queries can be redirected to. Once again, switching the mode is not difficult. DNS-based filtering is suitable if you do not need granular control for web filtering. Since this can only operate on host names and not full URLs, you do not get the level of accuracy that Flow or Proxibase provides. However, if you do not have the resources for this level of URL filtering but still require a solution, this provides a very low resource method of doing so. Flow-based is suitable for high traffic environments or situations where a proxy would be unsuitable. Proxy-based is best suited for high security environments or situations where users require a lot of feedback through block pages and or high levels of individualization. It is the most accurate and versatile option. Let's take a look at the steps that go into visiting a website to see where the web filtering function takes effect. First, a DNS request gets sent out. When the response comes back, the FortiGate device checks the details, assuming you are using DNS filtering. This does not happen on the initial outbound request because there is no point in using up resources to check if a website needs to be blocked when it does not even exist. Assuming the site is valid, the request passes unaltered, otherwise the unit acts according to the configured settings. Now let's assume that DNS-based filtering is not being used and the DNS request has just occurred, or possibly the computer knows the IP address already and no DNS request is made. After the DNS request takes place, the three-way TCP handshake occurs. This is allowed without any interference regardless of the website because proxy and flow-based filtering haven't occurred yet. After this, the HTTP GET request is made. With flow-based or proxy-based, nothing will happen on the FortiGate device until the HTTP 200 response is received. The reason is exactly the same. There is no point in spending resources to block a website that does not exist. If the website responds with a 300 redirect, the FortiGate will do nothing until it receives a 200 response. It will then act upon that specific URL, not the one that was typed in. There are advanced filtering options to have the unit rate redirects as well, but this is the default behavior. Just a quick highlight of the differences in the modes of operation. Proxy-based filtering is very secure. HTTP/HTTPS understanding is built into the proxy, so you would need to fool the proxy first in order to get invalid commands through. It is also the slowest method since traffic is cached, which causes delays. Flow-based has a much higher throughput, and since it does not run through a proxy, it does not incur the same delay in the traffic that a proxy would. However, it's not as secure since IPS is a pattern match engine. While it is programmed with the rules of HTTP, it does not have any understanding. DNS-based is very lightweight for both memory and CPU, but isn't very granular. It can only act on the host name, not the entire URL, since it is based on the DNS lookup. Also, since it takes effect before the website is even contacted, you will not be able to use any of the advanced filter options, just URL filtering and FortiGuard categories. Web content filtering is exactly like banned word detection in an email. Bad or unwanted words are given a weight value, and then all detections of these words are added together for a total which is compared to the threshold value. If the threshold is exceeded, you arrive at an action. It is important to mention that none of the web filter queries or actions are performed until the website actually responds. The reason for this is simple. There is no point wasting time blocking a page if the website is down or not responding. If you enable this feature, you should do so with caution. If the site is blocked, then you cannot see the website in order to confirm where the detection is happening. Also, the feature looks at both visible and non-visible information. Just because the site contains a bad word as a meta tag and is something the user won't see unless they view the source, it will still be treated exactly the same by the FortiGate unit. Once you decide on the method of inspection and take into account the limitations of that method, it comes down to the actual URL the user is visiting and how you want to control access to the web content. There are 4 possible actions for a URL filter: allow, don't block the site and do not make a log entry; block, block and make a log entry; monitor, allow the site and monitor it with a log entry. It is important to note an exempt match stops all further checking, including AV scanning for the current HTTP session, which can affect multiple URLs. Enforcing Safe Search can be done for Google, Bing, and Yahoo. Safe Search is an option that some search engines have in order to apply their filters to the search results that are displayed. This way, even if Safe Search is disabled in the browser, the FortiGate unit will make sure the query is subject to whatever settings the service decides. All the FortiGate unit can do is ensure that it is enabled. It cannot dictate the behavior of this, as this task is up to the search engine providers. It works by examining the URL and looking for the Safe Search string when you submit a search. If it is not there, the FortiGate unit will modify the URL to include it. YouTube EDU filtering is also available. This is a service offered by YouTube to educational institutions. When you create a special EDU account, YouTube provides you with an identifier. Unlike normal Safe Search, this does not append the URL, but adds an HTTP header into the packet. This identifies your school to YouTube when people visit. Within your YouTube EDU account, you can configure the filters and settings in order to limit video access within your school. When a user visits a website, you can use the FortiGuard Live service to find out the category for the URL and allow or block access by category. This is a great way to perform bulk URL filtering without having to individually define each website. There are also different options available here than if you use a URL filter list. FortiGuard is a live service from Fortinet where websites are examined and categorized by both automatic and manual methods. You can find a description for each of the categories and what we consider to be part of that category on the FortiGuard website. FortiGuard ratings are split into categories. Within each category are subcategories. You can block subcategories individually or block a whole category with all its subcategories included. You can find the full list along with an explanation of what these categories actually mean on our FortiGuard website. The FortiGate unit can maintain a list of recent website rating responses in memory, so if the URL is one that the device already knows about, it will not have to send back a rating request. Two ports are available for the unit to query FortiGuard with: port 53 and port 8888. Port 53 is the default since this is also the port number used for DNS, which is almost guaranteed to be open. However, any kind of inspection will reveal that this traffic is not DNS and prevent the service from working. In this case, you can switch to the alternate port 8888, but this port is not guaranteed to be open in all networks, so you will need to check this before setting this up. Since caching does consume memory, it should only be used if there is sufficient memory available on the FortiGate unit for this purpose. It's important to point out that FortiGuard is a live service. If the unit cannot make a connection to the FortiGuard network, all related options will stop functioning. If your contract expires, you have a 7-day grace period before FortiGuard will stop working. Another option is to restrict the amount of access users have by limiting the time they spend on websites based on the categorization. This is done with the quota option. This feature can be tricky to configure properly with larger websites. Most large websites store data in multiple locations, so the category of the site actually switches around a lot. Be sure to map out a website that you are not familiar with. The FortiGate unit can gauge how much time is spent on a website based on the time between URL lookups to a different category. A single quota can be configured to apply to multiple categories. For example, if you had a 5-minute quota that applied to both games and news websites, 2 minutes spent on a news site would leave you with 3 minutes for games. Quotas cannot redirect you once the website is loaded. For example, if you had 45 seconds left on your quota and you visited a website, it would likely finish loading before 45 seconds was done. You could then spend 20 minutes browsing the information you received. You could not get blocked or notified until the next attempt to access another one of these websites. The reason for this is that the connection to the website does not stay open. Once you receive the information, the connection is closed. Just like spam filtering, there is the possibility for errors or a scenario where you simply do not agree with the rating a site has been given. In this case, you can use the web portal to contact the FortiGuard filtering team and submit a website for a new rating, or to get it rated if it is not already in the database. At times, there may be cases where you do not agree with a rating provided for a website and the FortiGuard team does not agree with your reclassification request, if the admin has even submitted one. Other times, you may want to allow access to a website, but do not want to allow the entire subcategory. For cases like these, you can use rating overrides. This allows you to change the rating for a given website. It provides a way of overriding the Fortinet website category system when required. The action applied to the website will be whatever is configured for the category it is assigned in the rating override. These overrides are local and do not get submitted to the FortiGuard team. You cannot use wildcard or regular expressions, only host names like google.com or www.google.com and not www.google.com/index.html because it is a URL. You also have the option of using local subcategories. This can be used for a number of different reasons, such as changing the text on the block page that a user sees, or it can also be used as a way to change ratings on a website to allow access. When you configure a rating override, you must set the category to custom category. After this is done, you will have the ability to assign the website to an existing custom category or create a new one. While you can create a custom subcategory from the GUI, if you want to delete or rename it, you will only be able to do so from the CLI. Be careful that you do not make any spelling errors or create these rating overrides unnecessarily. In order to change the FortiGuard action, right-click on the GUI to display a menu that looks like this. A warn action presents the user with a web page that looks like this one. The idea is that while these websites are allowed, the user now knows that they are being monitored. They will not be able to access the website unless they click Proceed. Another option for restricting access is to use authentication. The rating lookup happens normally and the action shows Authenticate. When you set the authentication action, you get asked which groups are allowed and what the authentication interval is. The interval sets how much time can go by before the user is prompted and needs to authenticate again in order to continue accessing that category. The user is then presented with an authentication page and told to enter their user information. This is then verified against who has been allowed access on the FortiGates configuration. If all of these checks are successful, the website is displayed, otherwise access is denied. Here's a look at the web filter profile. At the top, you can enable FortiGuard and assign the actions to the various website categories. Like all the UTM security profiles, it is enabled through the firewall policy. If you scroll towards the bottom, you will find the more advanced options that can be enabled, like Safe Search and HTTPS scanning. Once you have enabled and saved the settings you require, you will need to apply the profile to your firewall policy to activate the options. There are several different components to web filtering, and when enabled, the inspection order follows the following steps: the local URL filter, FortiGuard category filter, web content, and finally the advanced filter options in the profile, such as Safe Search. Just like spam filtering, all the enabled checks are performed until an action is decided on block or allow. If there are no explicit match, then access is allowed to the site. The following is an example of the logs that are generated as a result of applying a web filter profile to the UTM setting on a policy. In this web filter profile, the social networking subcategory is being monitored. Just as with URL filtering, allow will not create a log entry, but all other settings will. Monitor will allow the site and log the traffic. When a user browses to a website like Facebook, we should see an entry in the logs under Security Log Web Filter. In the log entries, we can view details such as what policy the traffic was subjected to, what profile type, and profile name that triggered, and the URL that was accessed. We can also view the raw log data by selecting the Download Raw Log button in the top right. When we open the downloaded file, we are presented with the information in a syslog format. Now it's time for the labs. In this lab, we will be working with web filtering. Exercise 1 will make use of the FortiGuard category filtering.